Welcome to Que Sera, a podcast hosted by me, Sera and Lalone. Join me as I go straight to the sources of my curiosity. Each episode, I get to discover or rediscover everyday educators as we discuss their passions and their projects. Listen in on our conversation and let our words spark imagination and inspiration. Welcome back to the podcast. I have someone, a passionate educator who is coming from all the way in Southern Ontario. I spoke on my last episode with Aaron Langille from Northern Ontario. Now we're going all the way down south, speaking with Rob Dunlop, an educator that I think it's been a couple years, Rob, that we've known each other. We connected at the EdTech Summit in Kitchener. I remember that after I gave my Ignite. I think you ran up to me while I was wobbling off the stage and into the hallway and tapped me on the shoulder. And I was like, holy moly, who is this huge, big guy coming to talk to me after my Ignite? And just with the jolliest and most positive, radiating positivity, personality. We chatted a lot in Kitchener, and then we got to see each other at Connect last year in Niagara Falls, and just on Twitter here and there. So I'm super pumped to have you on the podcast tonight because, well, again, as I was strolling on my Twitter feed, I kind of just stumbled upon this really cool Ignite. And I think it's almost like Ignites that connected us, because I gave my first Ignite when we met, and then we gave an Ignite at the same conference last year. And now we're talking about your Ignite and a new book that you're going to be publishing in 2020. So with that little mini intro said, Rob, I'll get you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hey, how's it going, guys? My name's Rob Dunlop, and I'm the technology consultant for the District School Board of Niagara, but I also have this side passion, which is talking about happiness and education. And I do remember that day very specifically.
Yeah.
I watched you do an Ignite, and I think at the time you were either in Teachers College or just started your career, and I was blown away. I was thinking of the confidence and the initial impact that you were having with this amazing Ignite, and that you were able to get up there in front of 500 educators and do this. So, and I really pledged to myself that when I see something amazing, I make sure I let people know it. And so then that's why I kind of chased you down and freaked you out probably at the beginning. But
you're tall in person. You were tall.
Yeah, I'm a big guy. And it was interesting, when I went to that EdTech Summit in Cambridge, when I got the invitation to go, it was, most people are doing Google and all these other things. And I do that in my daily job, but I put in a proposal to talk about happiness and education. So it was I think the reaction was oh, interesting. Okay, it's a tech conference. Why are you going to talk about happiness? But the reason I talk about it is because it's really been the thing that I've been most passionate about in the last 3 or 4 years. And I literally will talk to anyone who will listen. And that's why I love doing things like podcasts and things of this nature, just because it's a good way to get your message out there.
Yeah. Oh, so I remember I went to your session at that conference, and it was hard because for me, as a young, passionate little education student still in the faculty, I hadn't, and I still haven't gained that experience, that all of the other educators that were in your workshop have, and those ups and downs in education. So I think being there and listening to your perspective and the different, I don't know, just testimonies of the different educators and their realities throughout the years really opened my eyes to the reality of what this career could bring on.
Yeah, and that's I think what like I was dealing with. Like not only was I dealing with the ups and downs and the peaks and valleys of education, but I was seeing a lot of people around me deal with that. And part of when I started this was just and thinking about this and eventually coming out with this idea of writing a book on it was that this is what all educators face. Like it's like everyone has these peaks and valleys, and I think what I've learned is that we need to develop the strategies on how to get out of those valleys when they're in them. I think there's nothing sadder than seeing a teacher who gets in a valley or gets in a rut and just can't get out of it and just ends up there. And so part of it is at one point I was in a real deep valley. I was really frustrated and I was pretty much ready to leave education. And I realized I had a bunch of realizations that came along. But what I learned throughout this whole process is that there's things that we can do and there's things that we can change in our lives that can get us out of those valleys quicker. The research in positive psychology is actually that only 10% of our happiness is determined by circumstance, whereas the 40% is determined by the choices we make, and the remaining 50% is genetics. So my kind of idea with myself originally, how it started, was I wanted to make the most out of that 40% and try and do the things that will make me the happiness within my control, and see what that would do and how that would affect my love of teaching and my overall lifestyle. And I began to see that I could help other teachers get the best out of their 40%. So that's really the summary of what the book's about. It's like helping teachers get most of the 40% in education.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost like it's your why, basically, of this book. It's like your mission. And so to start off, I think I just find it so wild. Like, how many years have you been teaching, first of all?
I think this is my 16th year in teaching.
All right. So 16 years in teaching, peaks and valleys. You get to a point where you're almost like so low, and then you're writing a book about happiness in education. Like, I think I need more details on that transition, because I've known teachers and I've almost, just in my 2 years, like seen teachers in these valleys, and I can't even begin to comprehend, like, how do you get back up?
Well, my last valley was a real bad one, and I never really get into the specifics of what happened, because what I've realized that's not really the important part of it.
Right.
But something had happened that I deemed to be unfair, and there was a bunch of things happening at the same time. But this one thing really, really shut me down, and I shut down completely, and I became this. It's funny because you describe me as like radiant and positive, but I became the exact opposite. I became this very cynical, toxic, negative person. And I did this for like 3 or 4 months, where I was really just walking around angry all the time. And I was just looking for outs in education. I was looking for ways to get out of it. And it was very interesting. My wife was watching me struggle through this, and it was really affecting my home life. It was affecting everything. And my wife came home one day from the library and brought me this book by Sean Acor called Before Happiness. And when you're feeling like that, sometimes you don't want to read a book like this, but I was like, what, I'll give it a shot. So in the first chapter, it was very interesting. He talked about how reality is subjective. And I never thought about it like that. Like I never thought I just thought reality is reality. And my reality at that time was that my biggest reality in my head every day was, why did I leave the classroom to go to this ed tech consultant role? Like I should have just stayed in the classroom, kept my focus on kids, worked with kids, and I couldn't see any positives of leaving that classroom. And I was thinking to myself, I just wasted 3 years of my teaching career doing what I was doing. And so I read that chapter, and in the chapter, he's got this point where he talks about how happy, successful people can see multiple realities of the exact same situation. And that was like, it was sticking in my head, and it was like, I was trying to get my head around that idea, is like, because I just thought reality was reality. Well, I woke up the next morning, and I have this habit of just looking out my back window every time I get up, looking out my backyard, and I literally welled up with tears. Like my eyes completely welled up with tears. And it was like all of a sudden I saw a different reality of than what I was seeing for the last 4 months, where all those positive things seemed to be blocked. And I started to think about things like the relationships. I worked with two of my best friends in my role. I started to think about the skills that I developed. Like I was becoming like a speaker. I was becoming an author. I had all these things going, and then I was thinking of the impact that I was having in the board. And I started looking at my family, my kids, and all of a sudden I just get this flood of gratitude. And it was just simply being able to see it from a different reality. And then one thing I noticed was when I look back on it is that situation that occurred to me occurred to other people too. It occurred to everyone that was in this situation with me. And I was the only one handling it like that. I was the only one, becoming very toxic. And what I realized I did is I started to pull all these negatives, everything that would happen. I would just try and find the negative and just kind of pile it on top and snowball it. And it put me in a super bad place. But after that day, I realized that I had control over what I was choosing to focus on and how I was choosing to spin situations. And now I find it's my number one coping mechanism when things aren't going right or things go wrong is I look for other realities that might exist. And those realities are the ones that are probably going to have a more positive outcome. So just reading that chapter had a huge impact on how I was able to see things. And I'd actually was in the process of writing a book at that point before I got really upset, and I just couldn't write anymore. I just wasn't
Mm.
feeling good about it. And after that day, I remember a couple of days later, I started writing again, and I said to myself, like, we have a lot more control over how happy we are in education than we might think. And that's really been the driving force behind completing this book for the last 3 years.
Wow. I have goosebumps. Oh,
Yeah.
that whole idea of gratitude, it just kind of like sparked an idea, because what I've been seeing recently, like for a while actually on your Twitter feed, is this app. And I want you to, well, first of all, I don't even know what it's called, but when I see the tweets of your, like the time that you spend on this app to make you reflect on things in your life that you are thankful about. I don't know if this is, the purpose of your tweets, but I always like stop, reflect, and it like makes me think about what I'm grateful for. Like in that moment of scrolling, I just like get to benefit, like the fact that you took the time to, think about, like take the time to be mindful that day, and like posting it like reminds me that I should be mindful.
Yeah, yeah. I would say, like, if I was to say, like, in terms of writing this book, I've actually been writing this book as almost self-therapy, to be honest. Like, and so
That's so
when I wrote
powerful.
this,
Wow.
yeah, when I wrote this book, I remember thinking to myself, like, it's not about just writing a book, it's about living it. So when I would write chapters on whether it be like mindfulness or gratitude or kindness, all these things, relationships, all these things that tie into happiness, I would live it completely for that like portion of my writing. Like, so say it was like 6 months, I would write a chapter. I would look at every app, I would read every article, I would practice all sorts of things, I would engage in conversations. So when I was doing the part of the book is on routines, and part of it is gratitude. Now gratitude really is like it is the one. It's like you want to work on becoming happier. It's like gratitude just changes your perspective. So I was working on this gratitude chapter, and I was trying all different things like gratitude walks, gratitude journals, and I liked them, and
Okay.
they were great. Every time I would do something I'd feel good. But for me, it didn't stick completely till I started looking at apps. And I never thought of, like, I was going through a little thing where I want to use my device to make me feel better. Like, I don't want my device to take away from my life. So I was looking at, and I just saw these gratitude apps. So I started looking at them, and I went through a couple, and then I found it. I found this app called Happyfeed. It's like Happyfeed, like feed.
Yeah.
And I downloaded it and it was so simple. And what happens is there's two things I loved about it initially, and because I was really researching what makes gratitude effective. And one, it was consistency. And this app has a streak feature built into it. So every day you
Gamification.
post, you build streaks, just like they do on Snapchat and things like that. So you get these streaks built right into it. And the other thing is it has notifications. So I for myself, because I'm always so busy, everyone's busy doing things. It's those dings on your phone that kind of wake you up. So I remember opening this app and going, I think I like this. It only wants three things. I can put some pictures in there. So I downloaded on my phone, and when I have it, so I do the first day, and then I set my alarm for 10 in the evenings. That's when I'm normally winding down, and I get this ding, and it says, "What are you grateful for?" And I was like, so I put some stuff in there, and then I keep doing it, and I was like, this is so simple. It's only taking me 2 or 3 minutes a day, and it's actually it just felt so good to do it. But I'll tell you the most interesting thing about this app is I really
Okay.
loved it, and I had a 100-day streak going, and it wasn't quite 100, but it was about 100 days in a row I'd used it. And I get a call that my mom's been taken emergency to the hospital. And when I go to the hospital, we get devastating news, like terminal illness news about my mom. She's still with us, but like, so we get some super horrible news. And I remember like being a mess and going home, a mess all the way home, getting home and just wanting to hide, like literally just wanting to curl up somewhere, not talk to anybody, not deal with it. And I'm sitting there and my phone buzzes, and I was like, I remember being ticked off, like, why I don't want anyone to talk to me. And it said, "What are you grateful for?" And I was just like, it's
Oh.
the Happyfeed app pumped in. And I said, oh man, I had a 100-day streak going. I didn't want to let it go. I'm pretty stubborn like that. So I said, well, I don't know. I just got told this super bad news about my mom. And then I said, well, what am I grateful for? And then I thought about this nurse who was amazing at making my mom laugh. So I put that in my phone. And then someone saw that I was visibly upset in the parking lot, and they asked me if I was okay. And
Oh.
even on the worst day of my life, I was able to find three things that were good about the world. And I think for me, like I always think things happen for a reason. I think starting that app when I did and building up that momentum really helped me get through that really tough part in my life, because it forced me to see everything as positive. It forced me
Mm.
to neuroplasticity, train my brain to pick out the positives, and now I find like it's literally a habit, and I'm looking throughout the day for what's going on, what's super positive. And then at the end of every day, I just sit there and I just put in this app. Like currently I'm on 295 days of
Oh,
straight. And you think
amazing.
of a habit or routine you've adopted outside of hygiene that you have kept with that many days in a row. And it's so easy. And I show this app to people, and then I get texts like, Rob, I'm on my 150th day. I'm on my 100th day. I'm on my 200th day. It's one of these things that when people start practicing gratitude, you can actually feel it make a difference. Like you actually feel happier. And so my whole thing is like that app makes it super easy. It reminds me and it connects me to finding those things every single day. And I did the math on it, and at the end of a year, you would have a feed with 1,095 things you're grateful for. And it's got some neat features. It's got this little jar in the corner. When you touch it, it throws a random day at you. Or it's got this other one when you post, it says, what happened 1 month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago? And you hit it and you can look through those memories. I find when I'm in a
Mm.
bit of a funk, instead of like scrolling through Facebook or things that have like negative content, if I just need good things on my device, I open up my Happy Feed and I scroll through my app and I hit the jar and I look at all these, it has pictures in there, and I just think, man, my life is pretty awesome, and it's a great app. It's by far hands down the best use of my phone I have.
Man. So I'm I'm downloading it right now. Just letting you know.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
sold it. You sold
It's
it.
a game changer if you like doing stuff on tech. As being a male with bad handwriting, gratitude journals are hard for me because I don't
Yeah.
like writing down. I don't have nice penmanship. It frustrates me. It's not what I want to see. Like I think we see that a lot in teaching with boys, and
Yeah.
then they're printing or people who have bad penmanship. They don't write enough. Just if you do use the app, but when I was doing all my research on gratitude and how to do it effectively, some things that really are important are the idea that it's ultra specific. So when I go back to the beginning of using the app, I was saying things like, I'm grateful for my wife or my kids or having a good job. But then over time, the more specific I get, the more it means. So for instance, I'll talk specifically about this podcast when I do it later tonight. And I'll say something specific, like maybe that the fact is that serendipitously I met you at this Google
Mm,
Summit, and I'll even write Google Summit. And now 2 years later, we were doing a podcast on happiness and education. So the more specific you make it, it's so you're not going through the paces, right? So
right.
if you just keep it generic, you could write my job every single day, but I really try and look for those smaller things because I know what the bigger ones are. I try and push myself to find those really kind of cool moments each day. But that's the biggest thing is just being specific and using names and using locations and really making it personal is what really makes it effective. And not just
So
Happyfeed, but any type of gratitude journal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. See, I have thought long and hard about the idea of making a gratitude journal because I love to sketchnote. I love to write. Calligraphy is like a big thing, but I have not yet taken the time to do that. Take the time to sit down and doodle and draw and write. And so I think if I can get into this habit where, like you said, it's just simple three things, typing it and start banking it and seeing almost reaping the rewards from that, then I can go the next step. I need a more simple initiation to it rather than being, the Sarah that I am and just jumping into the most complicated and
You know, it'd be a
time
great
consuming thing.
idea for you though, is to use the gratitude app over, say, the course of a month or 3 months, and then open that app and use it to sketch note out of. So, say you were going to make
Mm,
12 sketch notes a year on gratitude, what you're grateful for, and then you would have data to draw from, right? Or you could do it
man.
every half year, because I bet you those sketch notes you could really get into them, and it'd be a great way for you to go back in the app and actually relive it.
Yeah.
So
And
that'd
just
be fun.
reflect on the past 3 months or whatever that may be.
You
Hmm.
know, something very interesting when you were talking about that, like today's World Kindness Day, right? And so if you go on Twitter and there's a ton of posts about random acts of kindness, and just so on a side note, kindness actually, like doing an act of kindness, actually has the most acute effect on your happiness in the moment when they look at like serotonin levels, right? So if you do
Okay.
something nice from someone and they can actually measure, it's what makes you the happiest. So I'm seeing all of this, and so about a couple of years ago, I was doing a lot of stuff on working on that kindness and trying to implement random acts of kindness. And I ran into something similar to what you're running into. Is what I found is I had all these great ideas that I wanted to do, but due to
Mm-hmm.
time constraints, family, and all these things, my completion rate was very low. So, for instance, say I meet you at the conference, and I know like I want to do something kind for you. Then I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? And I'm trying to think of like a gift I could get you or a book I could get you. And then I'll go and I have these thoughts, but it's so hard to sometimes complete them because just life gets in the way. And so I remember switching it up and saying, I want to be successful, and thinking like, why am I doing, like, what is my purpose with the acts of kindness? And it was really that I wanted to bring joy to people's lives, right? And
Mm,
then I thought to myself, well, why am I complicating this? So I'm going to simplify this. So I came up with this thing. I didn't have a name for it when I was doing it, but like when you write a book, you often have to learn to like name things. So now I call it random acts of recognition. And what that is essentially is that now instead of acts of kindness, and if I can do an act of kindness, I'll do it, but an act of random act of recognition is I act on authentic thoughts in the moment in the easiest way possible. So what you saw at the summit was a random act of recognition, is that authentically I was blown away by your Ignite. So how I'm going to deal with that is I'm going to come up to you immediately in the easiest way possible, is to walk up to you and explain that to you. Now, that's the other way I use my device a lot, is I have this thing where I'll be sitting on the couch and I'll have worked with an amazing educator or someone, and I'll have this thought go through my head of how inspired I was by them. And instead of just thinking it now, I make sure I act on it in the easiest way possible. So I'll have that thought and I'll pick up my phone, I'll text the personal email. You'll see every once in a while I'll give someone a shout out on Twitter. It doesn't matter how I do it. It just matters that it's authentically, the random part is important, because the randomness is why it's authentic, right? The reason why it's random is because it's only off authentic thoughts. So if I have this authentic thought, I literally just act on it in the easiest way possible. And what a game changer it's been. Like, if you look at this situation right now, had I done what I did prior to doing this, I would have sat in my seat, watched you present, and think to myself, wow, that is super impressive. She's this new in education. And we would never have talked. We would never have connected at Connect. I would never be on this podcast. So many of my relationships now come out of the idea of that I'm just quickly recognizing things that I think are amazing in education or in my home life. And it has had the craziest impact on not just me, but like the people you send them to. It brings so much joy to people when they get these little texts or emails or letters on their desk or stick-it notes. So it's the other one that I tend to find for myself. I need to do things that are quick and easy and in the moment if I'm going to stick with them and be successfully make it part of my daily routine.
And like that being said, I find it crazy how this random act of that random act of recognition, which is authentic, it benefits not only like the person that you're recognizing, but like you were saying, when you do it, you get that kick, right?
Yeah,
Of
and I
serotonin.
explain
And
it
so
like
like
this, like
everyone's a winner.
when you look at it, right? Like, so when I get the thought, I feel good and I smile. Then when I pick up my phone and send it to you, I smile. Then I anticipate you getting it, and I'm excited to know if it's going to make your day better, if you might say something back. So that anticipation is highly tied to happiness too. Like, that's why vacations are important for our happiness, because we anticipate. Well, the minute I send a text, that's positive, I'm anticipating your reaction. And then when that reaction occurs and you send something back like, Rob, I had the worst day today and this helped turn it around, I feel great again. So if you look at how many points of happiness that's creating throughout your day, that 30-second text is really impacting you multiple times in the next like short period of time.
When you were explaining your book in each chapter and how you lived fully, while you were writing each chapter, and that's how we kind of got into the gratitude topic. I want to say, like, I just have so much respect for the fact that you took the time to make sure what you were writing was like true, not only for you, but you did the research to like back everything up. And that's kind of what I want to dive into right now, is like, what are the different elements that your book, can provide for a teacher, for them to be able to strive for happiness in education, and like, how was the process of writing it? Like, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's a ton of work. You could never do it if it wasn't your like passion, right? Like, it's
Yeah,
just
because you
too
weren't
much
just writing
time
it
and
though.
effort.
You were like living it and writing it. So like I
The
could write a
living it was
book.
the fun part though, right? Like,
Yeah.
again, it's a reality thing, right? Like like if you're just doing it because it's work, it becomes stressful. But if you're doing it because you love it, it becomes a passion, right? So
You
when
got
I
it.
was doing this, at no point did I feel like I was working or grinding. I felt like I was getting better. I felt like I was getting mentally healthier and stronger. And, I have a lot of really good friends who have helped me through this process. And when I bring my book to them and talk to them about it and we have meetings on it, I really try and tap into their expertise. And one of the things that was echoed over and over to me was that you need to tell people things they can do. And at first I was really resistant to this, because I was like, you know what, there's no formula for being happier. And so I can't say to you, you do A, B, and C, and then you'll be happy, because it just doesn't work like that. It's like, so but I began to realize what they were saying was, it's not that people need to do what I'm doing. Like, for someone to be happy, it's not that they need to do random acts of kindness, do a Happyfeed, and live the life I'm living. It's the exact opposite is that. But what it is the elements of this book that I've really tried to work on were getting people to reprioritize what they think is important, and change the way they see how they go to work, and how they do what they do. It's almost like a self-awareness piece. Is that the front matter of the book, it talks a lot about the importance of happiness and the research behind it. This book is there's a lot of research behind everything that I've done, and I've actually included it in the book. And when we're talking about that, the benefits of happiness and the fact that you have control over happiness, it's just becoming aware of, this is something that we don't think about. I use an analogy basically of when we get our eyes tested, right? So I'm getting old now. I'm in my 40s now. And I remember last year I went to get my eyes tested, and I didn't have any idea they were starting to fail me until I looked inside that phoropter machine where they change the lenses. And because I had that check-in, I realized that things were starting to slip. Well, I feel the same with happiness and education, is that if you just don't think about it, if it's just just going through your career, you can slowly become more cynical or jaded or less happy in the profession. So part of me wrote this book as like a checkup. So when people read it, and the peer reviewers I had, they said, Rob, that it really woke me up to thinking about this. But not only that, the idea of making it a priority, like making your happiness a priority in education, versus we get so caught up in all the what's of what we're doing. Like you mentioned the why earlier. So as I find, as we go further into our careers, we start focusing on what we're teaching, what subjects, what curriculum expectations, what technology we bring in, and we start to lose why we became teachers, why we loved education, why we gravitated to it. So that's really the beginning. And one of the most shocking things for me when writing the book was, so the title of the book is Strive for Happiness in Education. Now, Strive is actually an acronym for students, team, routines, innovate, viability, and extraordinary. And so I was going through these chapters, and the chapter on students really helps readjust and regain your focus on how we need to be way more student focused. Sometimes we get caught up in all the what's. The students are why we're there. The T is the team, and it really talks a lot about how important relationships are. If you look at any research in happiness, relationships are really, it has the greatest impact on happiness. So then so you got to think, as you're writing a book, you don't really know where it's going. So these chapters seem to be falling in the realm of 12, 15 pages, and each chapter. And then I get to writing this chapter on routines, and I'm like, whoa, this is it. This, and then I started reading, and I'm like, I can't put this in 10, 15 pages. It ended up being 90 pages. And when I was writing it, I was like, people need ideas. People need starting points. They need to try different things. Like if we go back to the phoropter, and when we're looking through it, what happens is the eye doctor changes lenses and asks you, is it getting better or worse? Right? And if you say better, they keep changing them until it gets better and better and better. And that's how I see those routines, is we need to try things, try gratitude, try kindness, try mindfulness. And in the book, it's very specific to education. This is how you could try at school every day. And then the ones that work for you, you keep it. the ones that they don't work for you, like I struggle with mindfulness, and right now I keep working on it, but it's a really tough one for me. The gratitude one was really easy, the recognition one was easy, and it brought me a lot of happiness. So the whole idea of the book in that routine section is like, here are strategies, and it's backed up by research. And then the I is basically the importance of change in education. It gives some stories on that. The V is viability, which is handling the highs and lows and not getting stuck in those ruts. And the E is just pushing to be extraordinary in your own right. Like, it's not that you're competing with others, it's that you just got to go out there and continually try to get better for those kids. And I like, Tony Robbins has the best quote. He says progress is happiness, and it's about just continually pushing ourselves to be that teacher we always wanted to be.
So essentially what you're saying is like, you have to be happy for you first to be, happy for your students. And when you were explaining that whole idea of like, you need to think about your happiness, was there any like tie in to like, to be happy, we also need to take care of ourselves, and to take care of ourselves, we need to like consider our mental health, and all of those things. Was there like a chapter or like a little section about that?
For sure, yeah, 100%. Like, when in the routines part, and it also comes in the viability part, it's the idea of self-care is so important. We as educators are terrible at self-care. We really are. Like,
Amen.
we're so empathetic, and we get into this profession because we want to help other people, but at some point we stop realizing that we need to take care of ourselves. So one of the things that really struck me as I was reading Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, and she has this part where she talks about giving herself permission slips. And it really resonated because we run a leadership program in our board that I'm a part of, and it's for teachers who want to be leaders but not administrators. And it's so interesting. We brought a social worker in, and he was going through all these self-care things. Like, he was going through this massive list of like different things you could do, like eating, sleeping, all these things. And they're all kind of things that I think many of us know. So I pulled a group of people, and I was curious because I'm on the organizing committee. Is this important? Do we need this guy back? And it was a resounding yes. But here's what was so interesting. One of the participants, I said, well, why? And they kind of agreed that we need reminders about self-care. It's not just going to happen. We need to actually be reminded of its importance. But then this one guy says this, and everyone was like, you nailed it. Is he says, you know what, Rob? The most important part of that speech is that he gave us permission to take care of ourselves. And I think that's it. I think when I watch these teachers agree to that, and the conversation is that often we just don't give ourselves permission. And if we don't give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves and love ourselves and do the things we need, then we're not going to function at the level we want to function at. And that's even talking about teachers who are like just uber motivated and uber inspired, because you can be so passionate about education in your students that eventually you burn out just because you've put everything in there and you're not doing what you need to take care of yourself. So I really believe that, like, from writing this book, that self-care is an area that educators need to work on the most.
It's hard, but I love that we are talking about it more and more and more and more, and we will continue to talk about it until we finally realize it. In this whole process of writing the book, because obviously you were working your regular job, you have a family, you're active on Twitter, you're speaking, like, and you're practicing what you're preaching because you're talking about self-care. I'm just wondering, like, how did you find the time to give yourself and allow yourself those permission slips to find the time to take that nap, or to, not write your book that one night? Or what kind of little things were you like stopping yourself from doing in order to have more self-care?
Yeah, it's a great point. Like, but sometimes, like, it's not necessarily slowing down completely for me, right? I think that's where the individual part comes into it. So I'll tell you a story that when it was a really weird situation happened. I kind of have to tell you the beginning part. I went into this school to support a teacher, and based on the emails, I thought she was like 21, like your age when I met you, kind of deal, 22 maybe. And so because there's so much like energy and emotion in this email, and I get in there and I see this lady, and I was like, "Oh, is so Wendy here?" And she's like, "I'm Wendy," and I had no idea what to say because I was expecting someone in their 20s. This lady had been teaching 28 years, and when I left that school, I remember her energy and her love and passion is actually what inspired me to write this book, because I drove out the parking lot thinking that right there is what I want to be 28 years into education. And then just fast forward a couple months, I had to do a presentation at Brock University. It was my first ever real bigger presentation, and I did it on engaging students and learning. And I had an epiphany mid sentence that I thought to myself, if I could do anything, if I could use this time better, I would help these students keep their own level of engagement in education. So the weirdest thing happened. I went to bed that night. I pop up at like 5 a.m. and my eyes like spring out of my head, and I run down the stairs, and my wife comes down 45 minutes later, and I say to her, "Honey, I'm writing a book." And she's like, "You've never read a book?" And I said, "I know, but I had this whole book in my head." And so when I got home that day, she said to me, "Rob, like, how are you going to do this? Like, you're exhausted. You have this really busy, hectic job, and you come home and you're exhausted. Then when we finally get the kids down, you just want to sit on the couch and veg out." And I'm always trying to like I was just always thinking, if I just relax long enough, I'll feel better. And I said to her, I said, "This is going to sound so strange, honey, but I'm going to work out." And she's like, "What do you mean you're going to work out?" And I was like, "I'm going to actually exercise, and I'm going to use that to help me write the book." And she's like, "What are you talking about? Like, where are you getting
She's
this
like,
time
"Who are
from?"
you?"
And pardon?
She's like, "Who are you?" Like,
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
all these new
And I
things.
was, just to give you an idea, I was the heaviest I'd ever been. I used to be a personal trainer internationally, like used to fly around the world with a millionaire and train him. So I was in really good shape at one point, and my self-esteem was so low. Like, I felt my body was so sore. And so that night I got home and I got a gym membership, and I went to the gym and I did a little bit of cardio, and then I came back. And so my routine when writing the first book I wrote, I never published this book, is that I would work out first. Now, working out is self-care, right? It's taking care of your body, right? So for me, what I really needed was things like I needed but I just want to be honest with you. That first book, I lost total balance. I was obsessed with the book. I was working out, writing every night for 4 months. It was hurting my relationship. And so when I decided to write this book, I decided that I had a quote on my board that said, "It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when." It's not a matter of if I'm going to write this book. It's just, when is it going to come out? So one part for me was stepping back on my own timelines and just allowing myself to be passionate about something, but not getting caught up in where it was going to go or how I was going to get it done. So then on this one, I said, I need to exercise. So I continued to exercise, then write. That was like my formula for writing the book. I found it got the endorphins going. It gave me more energy. For me, what I found was the TV was actually a real negative in my life. Unless I'm watching something that it really interests me or that is positive, so now when my wife and I watch like TV, we PVR This Is Us and Million Little Things, or we watch hockey games together. But everything I do on that TV is quality. It's not just surfing around and wasting time, because I felt that was actually making me less happy. Now, this is for every single person, it's different, right?
Right.
But I think the idea of how I balance it out now is I say to myself, this is a passion of mine, just like playing sports is a passion of my wife. She played varsity hockey, and it's just like I put aside time in the evening. So once my kids go to bed, I'll work out like a couple nights a week, 3-4 nights a week, and I'll just say, "Hey, I'm going to go have some fun through there." And I'm going to go. So I come in here and I read, I listen to podcasts, I do all sorts of things. But the key for me was trying to find that sweet spot between still being a great dad, still being a great husband, and not only that, having a passion that I like to invest in, and that I felt was making me happier. So the self-care thing, especially like I got 2 kids and they both play travel hockey, but a lot of that is is what reality have you created around it? Like I could say to you, man, I'm so busy all the time. I'm in arenas 6, 7 days a week. And I'm like, whereas the reality is when I'm in those arenas, I'm socializing with other parents. It's great times. Then I'm watching my kid play hockey, and it's just like one of the best, my favorite things to do. So it's just how you choose to spend that time, right?
Yeah. So what can we expect? When can we expect Strive for Happiness and EDU? And how does one like are we doing a pre-order? Can I listen to an audiobook? Can I order it online? All of the little like logistical things.
Yeah, I'm so pumped you asked that because I literally, so I'm publishing through EduMatch out of Washington, and I found EduMatch through another author who said, who just talks so highly about Sera Thomas. And so Sera Thomas is, oh, she's amazing. You talk about someone who has a full plate and gets everything done and does it in a very positive and kind fashion, and is so caring to other people and to other educators. Like she's really good at what she does. And so I ended up going with EduMatch because of her. And so I had a conversation with her a couple nights about exactly what you said. I said, like, when do we see this coming out? They told me hopefully early 2020. We're thinking January, February 2020. I asked her about pre-sale. What is that? Because I'm a teacher, right? I'm not a book writer.
Yeah.
So I guess I will be soon. But I don't know how all this works. But she said, yeah, like closer to the date, maybe in December, we will send out pre-orders so people could pre-order their copies, and it will obviously be available on Amazon, I think Barnes and Nobles, and yeah, obviously when I do my speaking engagements on happiness and education, we'll bring some copies. But it is going to be unreal, like holding this book, because it's basically holding like 4 years of my life, and in I think it's like 250 pages. So it's going to be a super emotional day when that comes out. But yeah, super excited.
And it's like that 250 pages belongs to you and only you, and no one could ever write a book like you wrote it. And I think that's just what's so like special and unique. And I definitely want to get a signed copy next time I'm like down in Southern Ontario, as I called it. So for those who are listening, who are like, Rob, I need to pre-order this. I need to, like get the formula or the strategies on how to be happy in education. I'm in a valley. I need to chat with you. What is the best way to like connect?
I think I would just follow on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Rob Dunlop EDU. And if you find me on Twitter, then when all the book stuff will obviously come out through there. As I said, I've really been trying to, like, with the book, the social media thing is not my forte as much as I find writing right now. But like eventually I can transfer energy into that. But you'll see I'm working on a website that I'm gonna do, and I really love writing now. Like it's really become like a passion of mine. So I don't want to stop. So I think I'm going to start blogging eventually after that. But if you follow me for now on at Rob Dunlop EDU, you'll see everything come out. And yeah, I'd love to connect with you. I love hearing stories. People share stuff with me all the time about what brings them happiness. It's just, I love being in conversations with educators on this topic. I don't really I feel like my book is not just what did I do. It's like, what did the 1,000 educators that I've had conversations with, what are they doing? And I just bring that in. And while I was learning what everyone else was doing, I was trying things to create my own prescription for myself, my own formula that will, which it really has, like, I feel like the guy you met like years ago is even more pumped and passionate right now. And somewhere in between there, yeah, it got iffy, but so it's just about, living it every day and just enjoying it.
Well, it's funny that you kind of ended that way, because what you're passionate about is, connecting and talking about people. And essentially, again, what makes me happy in education is not only like going to school and seeing my students every day. And I told them that because we had a snow day yesterday, and I was like really sad that they weren't in class.
Yeah.
But the other part of like what ignites me is exactly like having these conversations and figuring out and just listening to what other people are passionate about. So we definitely connect in that way, like really strongly. So I'm more than pumped to have, like you said, that physical copy of, the book. And if an audio version comes out, I will be listening to it in my car, like I do my podcast. So just like congrats on this whole project, not only for the like the result at the end, like the actual book, but I think just that all that growth that you were able to benefit from for others that will, read the book and take away whatever they need. So thank you for your time. Thank you for, spending this last 45 minutes with me on the podcast, because I know, like we all are in education, we are so busy, and taking the time to just chat is more than I could like really ask for. So I just want to remind our listeners that in this big and beautiful world of education, we give what we can, we do what we can, and for the rest, que sera sera. Que sera sera is a proud member of the Voice Ed Radio Network. Original music, editing, and production of this podcast is done by the talented Mathieu Leroux. Find my podcast on all podcast platforms, including SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and now newly on YouTube. Talk to you soon.